Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose. Well, this is his real-life counterpart, the caribou. Caribou live in the far northern parts of the world, with multiple subspecies living in forests, mountains, and tundras. Of all the deer in the world, caribou are the only ones where both genders have antlers. In the wild, they mainly eat ground plants and lichens. And caribou that live in the Arctic are well known for undergoing large migrations, both in search of food and to escape from biting flies. And caribou have been domesticated into a form known as reindeer, which are bred for their fur and their milk, and yes, to pull sleighs. Here we see the caribou, or Rangifer tarindus. There are multiple different subspecies of caribou living throughout their range, some in forests, but many on the Arctic tundra. Unlike most deer, both male and female caribou have antlers. Caribou are well known for undergoing large migrations across the tundra, both in search of greener pastures and to get away from biting flies. And in many parts of the world, caribou have been domesticated into a form known as reindeer, used for a multitude of purposes, such as being raised for their milk, and yes, to pull sleighs. In fact, the very first animals to arrive here at the Columbus Zoo were in fact reindeer. This is the Reeves muntjac, also known as the barking deer. The barking deer gets its name from its loud call that sounds like a Rottweiler barking. This is meant to be its alarm call if it ever spots predators. Barking deer are said to be among the most primitive deer species because they have only spikes for antlers and they have 2 tusks protruding from their mouths, very much like ancient species of deer. In the wild, they tend to live in small herds and they eat things like water plants and leaves.
His tail is so big he doesn't even fit in my mom's camera.
Oh, I see one now. There's a monster. Past, I used to have a bell here.
Yep, this is the tufted deer, native to the marshes of Eastern Asia. Like the muntjac, the tufted deer has tusks on the side of its mouth which are used as weapons. But, unlike many deer, the males of the tufted deer do not have antlers. In fact, tufted deer, along with musk deer and muntjacs, are considered to be the most primitive of all deer. In the wild, they mostly eat grasses and aquatic plants. And they sometimes gather in small herds, usually made up of females and fawns. Here we see the moose, or Alces alces. Moose are the largest deer in the world and can be found across much of the United States and a lot of Canada, mainly living in forests. In the wild, they eat leaves, twigs, and they're even able to swim down deep to get aquatic plants. They have a distinctive flap on their necks called a dewlap. Unlike most deer, which live in herds, moose live alone, except for mothers with calves. However, in the far east of Russia, moose are often called elk. And during the rut, males will give out a low bellow, which will both attract a female, like this, or ward off rival males. In fact, during the rut, bulls can get so aggressive that they even attack trains, likely mistaking the whistle for the call of a rival bull. Here we see a whole herd of elk, native to the plains and forests of the western United States. They were wiped out in the eastern states, but are slowly but surely being reintroduced there, especially in Tennessee. In the wild, they are both grazers and browsers, feeding on grass, leaves, and shrubs. And during the rut, bulls will rally harems of cows and will attract females by making loud bugling calls, which can be heard for up to 5 miles away. And here we see a herd of fallow deer, native to the plains and forests of Europe. Now this one is just starting to grow its antlers. Unlike horns, antlers are all bone and they shed each year. While most deer lose their spots, that's as they mature, fallow deer retain their spots year-round.
Factories here. Now check out the rampage.
We have
You
been
still
100
see a
years,
tinge
but
of red.
have numbers.
And that's the blood going to the bone. Now just imagine, folks, these antlers are not done growing. And you feel the rhinos here decided to move away. Now also in the same field, down along the fence, right to the left of that tall tree, you're going to see some animals laying down. That's the third kind of antelope that we have, and those are the elands. Now they're the largest antelope we have. These are all young ladies, so both the male and the female have the horns. They're shorter, they're only about 18 to 20 inches long, and they're like a double spiral to a point. They also have what's called a dewlap hanging from their throat. Now, if you've ever seen like a picture of a Brahma bull and you see that big sack of skin hanging off their throat, that's called a dewlap. These antelope have that, so some scientists actually special. I know that a lot of us see deer on a daily basis, but these deer actually originate in the country of China, in the desert parts, and they were known in China as milu. We know them as Pear David deer. Now, back at the turn of the 1900s, the Emperor of China was trying to introduce his people to new cultural and political and religious ideas, and he was bringing in different people from around the world to do that. And one of them was a French Catholic missionary by the name of Armand David. And he came to China to set up a mission. He became really good friends with the emperor, to the extent where the emperor would take Father David with him on hunting trips in the Imperial Hunting Preserve, which was an extreme honor for anybody, let alone an outsider from Western Europe. And one of the animals that was in there was the milu. Now, Father David became very fond of these deer, and he was able to talk the Chinese emperor into letting him take some back to Western Europe to set up some colonies. And as it turned out, lucky for us he did, because soon afterwards, some devastating floods came through, along with the Boxer Rebellion. Now, the Boxers we know today as the Shaolin priest or the Kung Fu guys. Well, in China, they're known as Boxers. They didn't approve of the changes that the emperor was trying to make, so they started an armed rebellion. Now, in order to put it down, the emperor brought in outside armies and mercenaries, and of course those people brought their appetites with them. And along with the Chinese people, they had to eat. And once the imperial hunting grounds were breached, the milu took big hits and were taken down to numbers considered to be extinction. Now, these are all females that you see, with the exception of the big male that you see with his head towards the ground. Off to the far right, the three that you see laying together, those are fawns from this spring. Now, you'll notice the big buck, he's a little darker in color, and he's also looking like he's got some junk up in his antlers and a lot of blood and stuff. And that's part of the mating ritual that we'll talk a little bit about later. Now, they by themselves or by twos in certain areas. And a lot of those have been pushed out by the more dominant bucks, so that they're not going to be allowed to participate in the breeding season. Now, these bucks have already lost the velvet off their antlers, so they've already started some of their breeding activity.